The words caught in my throat like shards of glass. But nothing came out, only silence, thick and unyielding, as I watched my sister's eyes dart away from mine. It was a Tuesday morning in early spring, the kind where the sun filters through the curtains in lazy golden streams, mocking the chill that had settled in my bones. I remember the sterile scent of the hospital room, a mix of antiseptic and wilted flowers from the bouquet my mother had brought the day before. My throat burned from the laryngitis that had struck suddenly, inflamed by some viral intruder the doctors couldn't quite pin down. They said it was temporary, a few weeks at most, rest your voice, sip warm tea, avoid stress. But stress? How could I avoid it when every attempt to speak felt like swallowing fire, leaving me mute in a world that suddenly seemed to spin without my input? I was 52 then, Evelyn Harper, a woman who'd built her life on words. As a high school English teacher, my voice was my tool, my weapon, my comfort. I'd read aloud from Shakespeare to classrooms of fidgety teens, coached debate teams to victory with sharp critiques delivered in that steady, reassuring tone my students said made them feel seen. At home, it was the same, mediating squabbles between my grown kids over the phone, sharing recipes with neighbors in our quiet suburban cul-de-sac, or simply chatting with my husband, Tom, over coffee about the mundane miracles of our days. Tom, bless him, had been my rock for 28 years, a quiet engineer who preferred listening anyway. But now, with my voice stolen, I felt adrift, reduced to scribbling notes on a notepad or gesturing wildly like some silent film actress. That morning, my sister Lydia and my mother had come to visit. Lydia, 2 years my junior, with her sharp bob haircut and perpetual air of efficiency, bustled in first, carrying a thermos of soup. "Evelyn, darling, you look pale. Mom made your favorite, chicken noodle, just like when we were kids." Her voice was bright, too bright, as she set it on the bedside table. Mom followed, her frail frame leaning on a cane, her face etched with the lines of 78 years, half of them spent widowed and relying on us girls. She patted my hand, her skin papery and cool. "Rest now, Evie. We'll handle things at home." I nodded, grateful at first. Home was the old family house we'd inherited after Dad passed a decade ago, a rambling Victorian in the hills outside town, where Lydia and I had grown up chasing fireflies in the backyard. We'd kept it as a shared asset, renting out the upstairs for extra income, splitting the profits 3 ways with Mom. It wasn't much, but it was ours, a tether to our roots. I'd always been the one to manage the details, the repairs, the tenants, while Lydia handled her busy life as a real estate agent downtown. As they settled into the chairs by my bed, their conversation turned casual, or so I thought. I reached for my notepad to ask about the latest tenant's lease renewal, but before I could scribble more than a few words, Lydia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then at Mom, a flicker of something, guilt? Annoyance? Crossing her face. "It's the agent," she murmured to Mom as if I weren't there. "He says the offer's solid. We should move fast." Mom nodded, her eyes avoiding mine. "Yes, before things complicate further." Complicate. I felt a prickle at the back of my neck, like the air had shifted. I tapped the notepad insistently, holding it up. "What offer?" Lydia's smile faltered just for a second. "Oh, Evie, nothing to worry about. Just some business with the house. You focus on getting better." She squeezed my hand, but her grip was too tight. Her perfume, that cloying floral scent she always wore, overwhelming in the confined space. I tried to push, mouthing questions, but my throat rebelled, sending waves of pain that blurred my vision. They changed the subject smoothly, talking about the weather, the grandkids, anything but that whisper of an offer. As they left, promising to return soon, I lay there in the quiet hum of hospital machines, a seed of unease planting itself deep in my chest. Little did I know that silence of mine would become the key to unlocking a betrayal that had been simmering for years, hidden behind the facade of family love. To understand the weight of that silence in the hospital, I suppose I need to take you back to how things were before, when my voice filled the spaces of my life like the steady hum of a well-oiled machine. Life wasn't perfect, whose is? But it had a rhythm, a comforting predictability that I clung to, especially after the rough patches we'd weathered as a family. I grew up in that old Victorian house on Maple Street, the one with the wraparound porch where Dad used to sit smoking his pipe on summer evenings, the scent of cherry tobacco mingling with the honeysuckle climbing the trellis. He was a quiet man, a carpenter by trade, who built half the furniture in our home with his own hands, the oak dining table scarred from years of family meals, the bookshelf in the living room groaning under Mom's collection of romance novels and our school trophies. Mom was the heart of it all, a homemaker with a laugh that could fill a room, always baking pies or knitting scarves for the neighbors. Lydia and I were inseparable back then, two peas in a pod, as Mom liked to say. I'd be the one dreaming up stories, reciting poems I'd written on scraps of paper, while Lydia organized our games with the precision of a little general, bossing the neighborhood kids into line. We lost Dad to a heart attack when I was 42. Lydia, 40. It hit us like a freight train, leaving Mom adrift in that big house. That's when we decided to keep it in the family, turning the upstairs into a rental unit to help with expenses. I took on the management because I lived closer. Tom and I had settled in a modest ranch-style home just a few miles away, in the suburbs where the lawns were neatly mowed and the streets quiet enough for evening walks. Lydia had moved downtown, into a sleek condo that matched her fast-paced life as a real estate agent, always on the go with showings and closings. She thrived on the hustle, her phone perpetually buzzing, her outfits crisp and professional. My days revolved around the classroom. I'd wake at 6 a.m. to the aroma of fresh coffee brewing in our kitchen. Tom already up and tinkering with his latest gadget, a man who could fix anything from a leaky faucet to a broken heart with his patient hands. He'd kiss me goodbye, his beard scratching my cheek in that familiar way, murmuring, "Have a good one, Evie," before heading to his engineering job at the local firm. I'd drive to Lincoln High, the brick building where I'd taught for 25 years, greeting the custodian with a wave as I unlocked my classroom door. The room smelled of chalk dust and teenage energy, pencil shavings, faint hints of gum, and the occasional whiff of body spray from the boys in the back row. Teaching was my calling. I'd stand at the front, voice warm and inviting, drawing out shy students with questions that made them think. "What does Hamlet's soliloquy really mean to you?" I'd ask, pacing slowly, my heels clicking softly on the linoleum. Lunch was in the staff room, sharing sandwiches with colleagues, mine usually turkey on rye, with a pickle spear that crunched satisfyingly. Afternoons blurred into grading papers at my desk, the scratch of my pen marking insights in red ink, or coaching the debate team after school, their voices rising in passionate arguments that echoed down the halls. Evenings were for family. Tom and I had two kids, Sarah, 26, living in the city with her fiancé, working as a graphic designer, and Michael, 24, still at home part-time while finishing his master's in history online. Sarah would call weekly, her voice bubbly over the speakerphone as she described her latest project, the clink of her coffee mug audible in the background. "Mom, you have to see this logo I designed. It's got that vintage feel you love." Michael was quieter, often buried in books at the kitchen table, but he'd look up with a grin when I slid a plate of cookies his way, the warm chocolate scent filling the air. "Thanks, Ma. You're the best." Weekends often brought us back to the family house. I'd drive over with Tom, tools in hand for minor fixes, a squeaky door hinge oiled with a satisfying click, or repainting a wall where the tenants' kids had scrawled crayons. Mom would be there, her arthritis slowing her but not her spirit, stirring a pot of stew on the stove, the savory aroma of onions and herbs wafting through the rooms. "Evie, taste this. Needs more salt?" she'd ask, holding out a spoon, her eyes twinkling. Lydia would join sometimes, breezing in with takeout if she was rushed, her heels echoing on the hardwood floors. We'd sit around that old oak table, sharing stories, Lydia recounting a tough negotiation, her hands gesturing animatedly, rings flashing, me updating on school antics, mimicking a student's dramatic reading with a laugh. Those gatherings felt like anchors. Mom would pat our hands, saying, "My girls always looking out for each other." There was an undercurrent, though, subtle as the draft from the old windows. Lydia had always been the ambitious one, the one who pushed for more, suggesting we sell the house years ago when the market spiked. But I'd resisted, valuing the memories over money. "It's our legacy," I'd say, my voice firm but gentle. She'd roll her eyes good-naturedly. "Evie, you're such a sentimentalist." Mom mediated, her calm presence soothing any ripples. Tom noticed it too sometimes. Lying in bed at night, the fan whirring softly overhead, he'd turn to me in the dark. "Lyd seems stressed lately? Work?" I'd shrug, tracing patterns on his arm. "Probably. She'll be fine." Our marriage was like that, steady, built on quiet understandings. We'd met in college, drawn together by shared silences in the library, and built a life of small joys, gardening in the backyard, the earth cool under my fingers as I planted tulips, watching old movies on the couch, his arm around me, the popcorn buttery and warm. Looking back, it was idyllic in its ordinariness. But cracks were there, hidden in the foundations. Lydia's visits grew shorter, her smiles tighter. Mom leaned on me more for the house details, her voice quavering on the phone. "Evie, could you check the roof?" I heard dripping last rain. I'd assure her, my words a bridge over any gaps. I never imagined that my voice, that constant thread weaving us together, would be the thing to unravel it all. Life had its challenges, of course. No family escapes them unscathed. There were the usual financial squeezes, college tuition for the kids that stretched our budget thin, like dough pulled too far over a pie tin. Tom and I would sit at the kitchen table after dinner, the dishwasher humming in the background, poring over bills with furrowed brows. "We can cut back on cable," he'd suggest, his voice steady, pencil tapping the paper. I'd nod, adding, "And I'll take on that summer tutoring gig." We'd make it work, always had. With quiet determination and the occasional splurge on a date night, Italian at Luigi's, where the garlic bread arrived steaming, its buttery aroma making my mouth water before the first bite. Health scares dotted our timeline too. Mom's hip replacement 5 years back had us all rallying. Me coordinating doctor's appointments, my voice calm on the phone as I negotiated with insurance reps, Lydia handling the paperwork with her efficient flair, her pen flying across forms. "I've got this, Evie," she'd say, flashing a confident smile over her reading glasses. During recovery, we'd take turns staying overnight at the house, the creak of the old stairs a familiar soundtrack as I carried trays of tea upstairs, the chamomile steam soothing in the dim lamplight. Mom would grasp my hand, whispering, "You're my rock." Evie. Those moments bonded us, or so I believed, reinforcing the narrative of sisters united against the world's uncertainties. My own health had been reliable until then, minor colds, the occasional migraine that I'd chase away with aspirin and a dark room. But I took care of myself, morning yoga in the living room, the mat unfurling with a soft thud, my breaths deep, and even as I stretched toward the ceiling fan's lazy spin. Tom joined sometimes, his grunts of effort making me chuckle mid-pose. "You're more flexible than me," he'd tease, and I'd retort, "Years of chasing kids around the classroom." Work kept me active too, pacing during lectures, gesturing emphatically as I dissected Frost's poems, the chalk dust settling on my sleeves like fine snow. Socially, we were embedded in our community. Church on Sundays at St. Mary's, where the organ's deep notes vibrated through the pews, and I'd sing hymns in my clear alto, blending with the congregation's chorus. Potlucks afterward in the hall, plates clinking as we loaded up on casseroles, mine a green bean dish with crunchy onions on top, the savory scent mingling with coffee from the urn. Neighbors like Mrs. Ellis next door, who'd wave from her garden, clippers in hand. As I walked the dog, our golden retriever Max, his tail wagging furiously, paws patting softly on the sidewalk. Lydia's world intersected ours sporadically but meaningfully. She'd call mid-week, her voice crackling over the car speaker as she drove between appointments. "Evie, you won't believe the house I just sold. Ocean view, but the buyers haggled like pros." I'd laugh, sharing a quick anecdote from school, our conversation flowing like a well-worn path. Holidays amplified it. Thanksgiving at the family house, the turkey roasting all day, its juices sizzling in the oven, filling the air with thyme and sage. We'd gather around the table, Tom carving with precise strokes, plates passed hand to hand, mashed potatoes creamy and smooth, cranberry sauce tart on the tongue. Lydia would arrive fashionably late, bearing wine. Her laugh bright as she hugged Mom. Sorry. Traffic was a nightmare. We'd toast to family, glasses clinking, the warmth of the room wrapping around us like a quilt. Yet, in those gatherings I'd catch glimpses of strain. Lydia's eyes would linger on the house's outdated kitchen, her fingers tracing a chip in the countertop. We could renovate, increase the value. I'd shake my head gently. It's fine as is, Lyd. Tenants don't mind. Mom would change the subject. Her voice soft. Tell us about your latest deal. Dear. Lydia had her reasons for pushing. Her divorce a few years back had left her financially cautious, rebuilding alone in that condo with its minimalist decor, all sharp lines and neutral tones. She'd confide sometimes, over coffee at a downtown cafe, the espresso machine hissing in the background. Mark took half, Evie. I need to think ahead. I'd listen, my hand on hers, offering words of encouragement that felt solid in the moment. Tom and I had our private rituals too, fortifying us. Friday nights often meant takeout Chinese on the couch, chopsticks clicking as we shared sweet and sour chicken, the tangy sauce dripping onto napkins. We'd watch documentaries, his head on my shoulder, the narrator's voice droning soothingly. Interesting, huh? I'd murmur, and he'd nod, content in the quiet. Our intimacy was understated. A brush of hands in the grocery store, selecting ripe tomatoes, their earthy smell grounding. Or lying awake after lights out, whispering about dreams for retirement, maybe a cabin by the lake where the water lapped gently at the shore. The kids added layers of joy and worry. Sarah's engagement last year had us buzzing, dress shopping with her, fabric swishing under my fingers in the boutique, her eyes lighting up at the perfect gown. Mom, it's the one, she'd say, twirling, and I'd choke up. My voice thick. You look beautiful. Michael's studies kept him buried in research, but he'd emerge for family dinners, debating history with Tom over steak, knives scraping plates. The Civil War wasn't just about slavery, he'd argue. And I'd mediate with a smile, let's hear him out. In all this, my voice was the constant, the tool that connected, comforted, commanded. At school, it drew confessions from troubled students in quiet after-class talks, their chairs scraping as they leaned in. At home, it soothed arguments, like when Sarah and Michael bickered over holidays, my tone even. Enough. Let's talk it through. With Mom and Lydia, it bridged gaps, planning visits or dividing chores. I'll handle the plumber, I'd say, and it was done. But beneath the surface, resentment simmered, unspoken. Lydia's ambition clashed with my contentment. Mom's dependence weighed unevenly. I didn't see it then, wrapped in the daily weave of life, the scent of fresh laundry from the dryer, the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, the warmth of Tom's embrace. It was a good life, solid as the foundations of that old house. Until the illness stripped away my words, exposing the fractures I'd never noticed. Like sunlight piercing through storm clouds after rain. The illness crept in like a thief in the night, unannounced and merciless. It started with a tickle in my throat during a Friday debate practice, my voice cracking mid-sentence as I coached the team on rebuttals. Remember, evidence is your anchor, I said, but the words came out raspy, earning concerned glances from the kids. By evening, at home with Tom, it had worsened. Swallowing felt like sandpaper, and speaking sent sharp pains radiating down my neck. Honey, you sound awful, Tom said, his brow furrowed as he handed me a mug of honey lemon tea, the steam rising in gentle curls, its citrus tang soothing for a moment. I waved it off, scribbling on a notepad we'd started using for quick notes. Just a cold. It'll pass. But by Monday, it hadn't. At school, I tried to lecture on To Kill a Mockingbird, but my voice faltered into whispers. Then nothing. The students shifted uncomfortably, chairs creaking in the silence, until I dismissed them early with a gesture toward the door. The principal sent me home, her hand on my shoulder. "Get checked out, Evelyn. We need you back in full form." The doctor's visit was a blur, stethoscope cold against my skin, throat swab that made me wince, prescriptions for anti-inflammatories and rest. "Acute laryngitis," he diagnosed, his pen scratching across the chart. "Viral, probably. No talking for at least 2 weeks. Write notes if needed. 2 weeks?" It felt like an eternity. Tom drove me home, his hand on my knee at stoplights, the engine's hum the only sound between us. "We'll manage," he assured, but I saw the worry in his eyes, reflected in the rearview mirror. That first week in silence was disorienting, like living in a muted world. Mornings I'd wake to the coffee maker's gurgle, but couldn't call out to Tom. Instead, I'd pad downstairs in slippers, the floorboards cool underfoot, and tap his shoulder, pointing to the mug with a smile. He'd nod, pouring for both of us, the rich aroma grounding me. At school, I was on leave, so days stretched long, reading novels on the couch, the pages turning with a soft rustle, or tending the garden, soil crumbling between my fingers as I weeded. But communication frayed at the edges. Sarah called, her voice tinny on speaker. "Mom? You there?" I'd text back, thumbs flying. "Yes, throat issue. Can't talk." Her concern poured through. "Oh no, rest up. Love you." The real shift came with Mom and Lydia. They visited more often, ostensibly to help. Lydia would arrive with groceries, bags rustling as she unpacked, apples thumping into the fruit bowl, milk sloshing in its carton. "I got your favorites," she'd say, her tone brisk, avoiding my eyes as I mouthed thanks. Mom sat with me, knitting needles clicking rhythmically, yarn unspooling in soft loops. "Quiet suits you sometimes." "Evie," she'd tease gently, but there was an edge, a haste in her movements. It was during one such visit, midweek, that the first clue surfaced, subtle as a shadow lengthening at dusk. I was in the living room, notepad in hand, when Lydia's phone rang, a sharp trill cutting through the quiet. She answered, stepping into the kitchen, but her voice carried, "Yes, the property on Maple. We're considering options." "No, my sister's unavailable right now." "Unavailable?" I felt a chill, like a draft from an open window. I gestured for her to explain, but she waved me off, mouthing, "Work call," before continuing in a lower tone. "Proceed with the appraisal. We'll discuss shares later." Shares? The word hung in the air like smoke. When she hung up, I scribbled furiously. "What appraisal?" "The house?" Lydia's face tightened, just a flicker, before smoothing into her professional smile. "Oh, nothing major. Just routine maintenance stuff. You know how real estate is, always checking values," Mom chimed in, her knitting pausing. "Don't worry her. Lydia, Evie's supposed to rest." But their exchange of glances was too quick, too loaded, like a secret past in code. I tried to dismiss it, blaming paranoia from the isolation. That night, lying beside Tom, the sheets cool against my skin, I stared at the ceiling fan's slow spin. He sensed my unrest, rolling over to trace my arm. "What's wrong?" I showed him the note about the call. He frowned, reading it twice. "Odd, but maybe it's innocent. Ask tomorrow." I nodded, but sleep evaded me, the clock's tick amplifying in the dark. The next day, another visit, another whisper. Mom arrived alone first, her cane tapping on the porch steps. She settled in with tea, the cup clinking on the saucer as she sipped. "Lydia's tied up with a client," she said, but her fingers twisted the napkin, shredding it into flakes. When Lydia joined later, carrying takeout, Chinese, the soy sauce packets crinkling, they huddled in the kitchen while I rested on the couch. Snatches of conversation drifted. Sell before market dips. Evie won't notice yet. My heart pounded, a dull throb in my chest. I stood quietly, padding to the doorway, and caught Lydia mid-sentence. Her share. "We can buy it out cheap if we move fast." I froze, notepad slipping from my hand with a soft thud. They turned, faces paling. "Evie!" "You startled us," Mom said, her voice high. Lydia recovered quicker. Just hypotheticals, sis. Nothing set, but the air thickened with unspoken truths, like the scent of rain before a storm. I pointed to my throat, then the notepad, writing, "Explain, now." They exchanged looks again, Mom's eyes welling. "Later, dear. When you're better." That evening, alone with my thoughts, the suspicion took root. Why the secrecy? The house was ours equally. Dad's will had been clear, splitting it 3 ways. I'd managed it faithfully, from leaky roofs fixed with the clang of hammers to tenants' complaints resolved over polite phone calls. Lydia had always deferred, or so I'd thought. But now, in my silence, patterns emerged. Her past suggestions to sell, dismissed lightly. Mom's growing complaints about upkeep, her voice quavering on calls. Was this opportunism or something deeper? I began observing more keenly. Texts from Lydia came less frequently, her responses curt. "Busy, talk soon." Mom's visits included odd questions, like probing my finances. "How's the school pension looking?" Her gaze averted. Tom noticed too over dinner, pasta twirling on forks, sauce simmering with garlic. "They're acting strange," he admitted when I showed him notes. We puzzled it out, his hand warm on mine. The clues accumulated slowly, each a pebble in my shoe. A misplaced document on the coffee table during a visit. A real estate listing for our street, circled in red ink. Lydia snatched it up quickly. "Wrong file." Mom's slip. "Once it's sold, we'll all breathe easier." Sold? I confronted via text that night. "What's going on with the house?" Lydia's reply, misunderstanding. "Rest up, but doubt festered, a quiet ache mirroring my throat's pain." In the silence, I replayed memories, childhood rivalries where Lydia accused me of being Mom's favorite. Her voice sharp. "You always get the attention." Adult slights, her divorce. When I'd offered support, but she'd pulled away saying, "You wouldn't understand perfect life and all." Was resentment brewing all along? By week's end, the suspicion solidified. I couldn't speak, but I could listen and watch. The world sharpened in my muteness. Gestures, tones, avoided eyes. It was as if losing my voice had amplified everything else, revealing the cracks in our family's facade. The second week of my silence dragged on. Each day a slow unraveling of the threads I'd taken for granted. Mornings blurred into afternoons, marked by the rhythmic drip of the kitchen faucet I'd meant to fix, or the distant bark of Max in the yard, chasing squirrels up the oak tree. Tom went to work as usual, his lunchbox thumping on the counter as he packed it, sandwich wrapped in foil, apple rolling beside. He'd kiss my forehead, his lips warm, murmuring, "Text if you need anything," before the door clicked shut behind him. Alone, I'd sip tea on the porch, the steam curling in the crisp air, watching leaves skitter across the lawn like forgotten secrets. Mom called daily now, her voice crackling through the speakerphone I'd set up. "How's the throat, Evie? Any better?" I'd tap out responses on my phone, the keys clicking softly. Still silent. Docs say wait, but her questions veered oddly, inquiring about my will, of all things. "Have you updated it lately? You know, with the kids grown?" Her tone was casual, but there was a hesitance, a pause where she'd clear her throat, the sound phlegmy and forced. I'd text back vaguely, suspicion prickling like static on my skin. Why now? Dad's estate had been settled ages ago. Why dredge it up? Lydia's behavior sharpened the unease. She stopped by mid-afternoon one day, her car pulling up with a gravel crunch, engine ticking as it cooled. She carried documents this time, a folder tucked under her arm, papers rustling as she entered. "Just some forms for Mom's insurance," she explained without prompting, setting them on the table with a deliberate thud. But as she poured coffee, the pot glugging into mugs, I caught her glancing at me sidelong, assessing. When she thought I wasn't looking, she flipped through the pages, her fingers lingering on what looked like a property deed, our house's address stamped in bold. I gestured for the folder, but she slid it away smoothly. "Boring stuff, Evie. You rest." Her smile was tight, lips pressed thin, and she changed the subject to the weather, her voice pitching higher. Rain coming, they say. Good for the garden. As she left, hugging me briefly, her coat woolly against my cheek, I noticed the folder was gone, tucked into her bag with a zipper's rasp. That night I texted her, "What forms?" "Send copy." Her reply came hours later. "Handled it." No worry. The clues piled up, insidious as dust gathering in corners. During a family Zoom call, Sarah and Michael joining from their screens, pixels flickering, I observed from the sidelines, muted by choice and necessity. Mom dominated, her face filling the frame, wrinkles deepened by the camera's glare. "Evie's quiet today," she noted, and Lydia jumped in. "She's always been the talker." "Nice change." Laughter followed, but it rang hollow, their eyes not meeting the lens. When talk turned to finances, Michael mentioning grad school costs, Lydia steered it. The house could help. If we liquidated. Mom nodded too quickly. "Yes. Equity there," I typed in the chat. "What about my say?" The words hung there, unread or ignored as they moved on. Tom, beside me on the couch, squeezed my knee, his palm calloused from work. Later, in bed, the mattress dipping under his weight, he whispered, "They're plotting something. I'll call Lydia tomorrow." But when he did, over breakfast, eggs sizzling in the pan, yolk runny on toast, her voice echoed from his phone. "Tom, it's nothing. Just options." He hung up, frowning, butter knife scraping the plate. She's evasive. Midweek, the biggest clue hit like a gust of wind rattling windows. I drove to the family house unannounced, needing familiarity, the scent of aged wood and Mom's lavender sachets tucked in drawers. Parking curbside, tires hissing on asphalt, I saw Lydia's car there and another, a sleek SUV with real estate plates. Through the window, curtains sheer in the light, I watched them. Lydia gesturing animatedly, papers spread on the dining table. Mom nodding. A man in a suit taking notes, pen scratching audibly even from outside. I entered quietly, key turning with a soft click, the door creaking on hinges. They startled, chairs scraping back. "Evie, what are you doing here?" Lydia's voice was sharp, hands gathering documents hastily, edges crumpling. The man stood, extending a hand I ignored. "Appraiser," he introduced, but Lydia cut in. "Routine valuation, sis. For insurance." Mom fussed with tea, kettle whistling shrilly, avoiding my gaze. I scribbled on my phone's notes app, holding it up. "Why now?" "During my illness?" Lydia's laugh was forced, echoing in the room. "Coincidence. Market's hot." But her eyes darted to Mom, a silent plea. The appraiser excused himself, briefcase snapping shut, footsteps retreating. Alone, I pressed, "Show me the papers." Mom intervened, her hand trembling on the cup. "Later, dear." "Your voice. Stress isn't good." Driving home, wipers swishing against a sudden drizzle, the world blurred through the windshield. Doubt morphed into conviction. They were moving forward without me, exploiting my silence. Why? Flashes of old grievances surfaced. Childhood, when Dad praised my report cards more. Lydia sulking in her room, door slamming. Adulthood, her envy of my stable marriage while hers crumbled, her comments bitter over wine. Must be nice. Having it all. Mom's favoritism, subtle but there. Extra hugs for me. Quicker defense in arguments. I confided in Tom that evening. Notepad filled with frantic writing, pages flipping. He read, nodding slowly, fire crackling in the hearth. "We need proof." "Check emails?" But my accounts were clean. Theirs, inaccessible. Instead, I listened more. Eavesdropped on calls when they visited, hiding in the hall, floorboards creaking under my weight. Snatches. Cut her out gently. Her share to us. By week's close, the suspicion was a constant hum, like tinnitus in quiet rooms. I couldn't confront yet, voice still gone, doctors extending rest another week. But in silence I planned. Observe, gather, wait. The betrayal's outline emerged, shadowy but real, rooted in decades of unspoken jealousy. My muteness, meant to heal, instead revealed, amplifying whispers into roars. The silence stretched into the third week, a heavy blanket smothering my days, but it sharpened my senses like never before. I'd taken to carrying a small notebook everywhere, its pages filling with observations, Lydia's hurried footsteps on the porch, Mom's fidgeting hands twisting her wedding ring, the way their voices dropped when they thought I was out of earshot. Tom supported me quietly, his presence a steady anchor. He'd started working from home more, his laptop humming in the study, casting blue light on his face as he researched real estate laws late into the night. "We'll figure this out," he'd say, his voice low over mugs of chamomile tea, the herbal steam rising between us like a veil. The turning point came on a gray Thursday afternoon, the kind where the sky hangs low and heavy, promising rain that never quite arrives. My throat had begun to ease, the fire dulled to embers, but the doctor advised one more week of rest, no straining. I was at the family house alone, having driven there to check on a supposed leaky faucet Mom had mentioned in a text. The key turned in the lock with its familiar scrape, and I stepped inside. The air thick with the scent of polished wood, and faint traces of Mom's rosewater perfume lingering from her morning routine. I didn't announce myself. Habit or perhaps instinct. As I moved toward the kitchen, voices filtered from the dining room, Lydia's crisp and businesslike, Mom's softer, laced with hesitation. I paused in the hallway, my back against the wallpaper I'd helped choose years ago, its floral pattern faded but comforting. "Sign here, Mom. It's straightforward," Lydia was saying, papers rustling like dry leaves. "Evie's share transfers to us. Medical proxy gives us leeway while she's incapacitated." Incapacitated? The word slammed into me, cold and sharp. I edged closer, peering through the cracked door. They sat at the oak table, documents spread out, a stack of legal forms, pens capped and ready. The appraiser from before was there too, his suit rumpled, nodding along. "With her condition, it's temporary, but this power of attorney covers decisions. Market's peaking. Selling now nets us all a good sum." Mom's hand hovered over the page, trembling slightly. "But Evie, she loves this place. It's her childhood too." Her voice cracked, the cane leaning against her chair like a silent sentinel. Lydia leaned in, her tone soothing yet insistent, like coaxing a client through a deal. "Mom, think about it. Evie's always handled everything, the stress, the repairs. This frees her. We'll split the proceeds fairly, minus her share for the buyout. She's got her pension, Tom. We need this. My business is struggling post-divorce, and your care costs are rising." She placed a hand on Mom's arm, rings glinting under the chandelier's soft glow. "It's for the family." The betrayal crystallized in that moment, a shard lodging in my chest. They weren't just discussing. They were acting, forging ahead without me, using my illness as cover. I pushed the door open with a creak, notepad clutched like a shield. They froze, Lydia's face draining of color, Mom's eyes widening in shock, the appraiser shifting uncomfortably. "Evie!" Lydia recovered first, standing with a scrape of her chair. "You're supposed to be resting. How's the voice?" Her smile was plastered on, too wide, as she gathered papers subtly. I ignored her, striding to the table, my heart pounding in my ears like a distant drum. I flipped open the notebook, writing in bold strokes. "What is this? Selling the house? My share?" I held it up, thrusting it toward them. Mom looked away, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue from her pocket, the fabric crumpling softly. "It's not what it looks like, dear." Lydia sighed, crossing her arms, her blouse whispering against her skin. "Okay, fine. Sit down." She pulled out a chair, its legs thudding on the rug. I sat, the wood hard beneath me as the appraiser excused himself again, murmuring about another appointment, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Once alone, Lydia spoke, her voice measured, like delivering a sales pitch. "The market's hot, Evie. We've been talking, Mom and I, about selling. The house is a burden. Repairs eat into profits, and with your health, we thought it'd be best to handle it now." I scribbled furiously. "Without me? Using my illness?" Mom interjected, her voice quavering. "We didn't want to stress you. The doctor said rest." But Lydia's eyes hardened, a flicker of something raw beneath. Stress? You've always been the one in control, Evie. Managing the tenants, deciding everything. Mom relies on you, but what about me? I suggested selling years ago, but no, your sentimentality won out. Now, with you silent, we see clearly. This place ties us down. The words stung, unveiling layers I'd ignored. I wrote, proxy? Incapacitated? That's betrayal. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, the wood creaking under her weight. It's legal. You signed a medical proxy years back after Dad, for emergencies. This qualifies. Your voice gone, unable to decide. Mom nodded reluctantly, her fingers tracing the table's scars. We were going to tell you after. Split the money, help with your medical bills, whatever. Medical bills? It was minimal. Insurance covered most. This was greed, masked as concern. I felt disbelief morph into heartbreak, tears pricking my eyes as I recalled our shared history. The laughter around this very table, pies cooling on the sill, their cinnamon scent filling the room. How had it come to this? I mouthed, why, though no sound came, pointing to the word on the page. Lydia's composure cracked then, her voice rising slightly, hands gesturing. Why? Because you've always had it easy, Evie. Perfect marriage, kids, job. I lost Mark, scrambled to rebuild. You swoop in playing big sister, but it's pity. Mom favors you, always has. Evie's so responsible, she'd say. Well, now we're taking charge. Mom gasped softly. Lydia, that's not... But it was out, the resentment spilling like water from a cracked vase. Decades of it. Childhood jealousies I'd dismissed as sibling rivalry. Her accusing me of stealing the spotlight with my stories. Dad's proud smiles at my grades while hers went unnoticed. Adulthood amplified it, my stable life versus her turbulence. And Mom, caught in between, her dependence on me breeding guilt, perhaps enabling this. I sat there, the room spinning slightly, the ticking grandfather clock in the corner marking seconds like accusations. Shock numbed me at first, then anger simmered, hot and unfamiliar. They watched me, expectant, as rain finally pattered against the windows, streaks blurring the outside world. I wrote one final note. This isn't over. Then stood, legs shaky and left without a backward glance, the door closing behind me with a definitive click. Driving home, wipers swishing rhythmically, tears blurred my vision more than the storm. The truth was revealed, not just the plot to sell, but the deep-seated hatred or envy that had festered unspoken. My silence had been their opportunity, but now, as whispers of my voice returned, I'd use it to confront the storm they'd unleashed. The confrontation brewed over the next few days, a storm building on the horizon. Tom was furious when I showed him the notes, his jaw clenching as he read, coffee cooling untouched beside him. They can't do this legally, not without full consent, he said, pulling up documents on his laptop, keys clacking. We consulted a lawyer friend over the phone, his voice reassuring through the speaker. Proxies for health, not assets. Challengeable. But the emotional wound cut deeper. I replayed Lydia's words in my mind, lying awake at night. The fans were a white noise backdrop. Always had it easy, did I? Life's struggles, miscarriage before Sarah, Tom's layoff years back scraping by, felt diminished in her narrative. And Mom's complicity hurt most, her silence a betrayal of the bond I'd nurtured. By Saturday, my voice returned faintly, a raspy whisper like sand over stone. I tested it in the mirror, the bathroom light harsh on my tired face. Hello? It hurt, but it was there. Tom hugged me, his arms strong. Welcome back. I called a family meeting that evening, my voice cracking but firm over the phone. Come over, now. They arrived together, Lydia's car pulling up first, Mom's cane tapping up the walk. In the living room, candles flickering on the mantel, their vanilla scent cloying now. We sat in a circle, tension thick as fog. Explain, I croaked, throat aching but words flowing. All of it. Lydia crossed her legs, skirt rustling. We told you. It's business. No, I pressed, voice gaining strength. The resentment. Why hate me? She faltered, eyes dropping to her hands. I don't hate you. It's unfair. You got the praise, the ease. I fought for everything. Mom wept quietly, tissue pressed to her mouth. I never meant to favor. But you were so independent, Lydia. Evie needed me more, or so I thought. Dialogue unfolded raw, hours of it. Accusations, defenses, tears. Lydia admitted the plan. Sell the house, buy out my share at undervalued price, using the proxy as leverage. It was wrong, she conceded finally, voice breaking. Jealousy blinded me. The heartbreak peaked there in that room scented with regret. But confrontation cracked the facade, forcing truths into light. As they left, promises of halting the sale hanging fragile, I felt the first stirrings of empowerment. My voice, reclaimed. A weapon against the shadows. The days following that raw confrontation blurred into a haze of whispered phone calls and tense silences. My newly returned voice still fragile, like a bird testing its wings after a storm. I'd spend mornings in the kitchen, staring at the steam rising from my coffee mug, the bitter aroma grounding me as I replayed Lydia's admissions in my mind. Jealousy blinded me. Those words echoed, mingling with the drip of the faucet I'd finally tightened, its steady plink a reminder of all the small fixes I'd done for the family over the years. Tom was my constant brewing tea in the evenings, Earl Grey, its bergamot scent soothing, as we dissected the betrayal over the hum of the refrigerator. I couldn't let it rest. The discovery had cracked open a Pandora's box of questions, and I needed answers, not just apologies. So I dug deeper, starting with the documents. That Sunday, I drove back to the family house alone, the engine's rumble a low accompaniment to my thoughts. Mom was there, puttering in the garden, her gloves caked with soil as she pruned roses, thorns snagging the fabric. She straightened when she saw me, wiping her brow with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of dirt. Evie, come for tea? Her voice was tentative. The cane propped against the fence. I nodded, but once inside, I headed straight for Dad's old study. The room still smelled of his pipe tobacco, faint and nostalgic, bookshelves sagging under faded spines. Where are the papers? I asked, my voice hoarse but steady, pulling open drawers with a wooden scrape. Mom followed, hovering in the doorway, her shadow long on the floorboards. Evie, please. Let's talk first. But I found them. A folder tucked behind old tax returns, labeled property transfer. My hands trembled as I spread them on the desk, ink smudged from handling. There it was, the power of attorney I'd signed absent-mindedly after Dad's death, a precaution for medical emergencies. They'd annotated it, notes in Lydia's neat script, temporary incapacity, laryngitis qualifies, and the buyout clause undervaluing my share by nearly 30%, citing family discount and health considerations. Shock washed over me anew, cold as the draft from the window. You plan to cheat me, I whispered, turning to Mom. Her face crumpled, eyes welling as she sank into Dad's armchair, the leather creaking under her weight. It wasn't like that, she murmured, fingers knotting in her lap. Lydia convinced me. Your illness seemed so sudden, and we've been struggling. My medications, her business loans. We thought you'd understand once better. Understand? The word ignited something fierce in me. I paced the room, footsteps muffled on the rug, memories flooding, helping Mom with bills after Dad's funeral, my voice calm as I negotiated payment plans over the phone. Lydia's tearful calls during her divorce, me listening for hours, offering advice that felt like balm. This is theft, I said, voice rising despite the ache. Wrapped in concern. Mom wept then, shoulders shaking, the sound raw and heartbreaking. I didn't want to lose you girls. Lydia said it was temporary. You'd get your voice back, we'd explain. But I see now. It was wrong. Her confession peeled back more layers. How Lydia had initiated it weeks into my silence, painting me as overburdened, needing relief. Mom's guilt had made her complicit. Her dependence on Lydia's visits, groceries delivered with a brisk efficiency, doctor rides in her sleek car, tilting the balance. I left with copies of the documents. Tucked into my bag like evidence, the paper crinkling against my side as I drove home. That night over dinner, roast chicken, its savory juices pooling on the plate, Tom and I plotted next steps. "Call the lawyer tomorrow," he said, fork clinking against porcelain. But emotionally, the betrayal gnawed deeper. Sleep evaded me, the clock's glow casting shadows, as I wondered at the roots of Lydia's hatred. Or was it envy, twisted into something darker? The full confrontation with Lydia came midweek at her condo downtown. I arrived unannounced, the elevator dinging softly as it rose, city lights twinkling through the lobby windows. She opened the door in yoga pants, hair tied back, surprise flickering across her face before she masked it. "Evie, come in." The space was minimalist. White walls, abstract art, the faint scent of her floral diffuser humming in the corner. We sat on her leather couch, its cool surface unyielding, a glass of water between us, condensation beading like sweat. "I saw the documents," I started, voice stronger now, though still raspy. "The undervaluation. The proxy abuse," she sighed, leaning back, arms crossed. "It was a draft. We wouldn't have gone through without talking." "Lies," I countered, pulling out the copies, pages fluttering to the coffee table. "This is calculated." "Why, Lyd? Decades of this. Resentment." She looked away, toward the window where rain pattered gently, streaking the glass. Silence stretched, broken only by the distant honk of traffic below. Then haltingly she spoke. "It started young. You were the storyteller, the one Dad read to at night, his voice animating your words. I was the organizer, but that was practical, not special. Mom doted on your sensitivity. Evie's so empathetic." I pushed harder, became the agent, but then marriage failed, business dipped. "You? Steady Tom? Adoring kids? That teaching job where everyone loves you?" Her voice cracked, hands gesturing sharply. "When you got sick, silent, it was like a sign." Mom leaned on me more. "I saw a chance to balance things, sell the house, secure our futures. Your share? We'd compensate later. But yes, envy drove it. You had the voice, literally and figuratively. I wanted control just once." The admission hung heavy, scented with regret. I felt a mix of pity and anger. Pity for the little sister I'd overlooked, anger at the manipulation. "You could have talked," I said softly, throat tightening. Instead, betrayal during my weakest. We talked for hours, dialogue raw and looping, her recounting slights, my wedding where she felt sidelined, bridesmaid dress itching against her skin, Christmases where my gifts to Mom were thoughtful, hers practical, me defending but acknowledging blind spots, assuming her strength meant no needs. Tears flowed, hers first, then mine, tissues crumpling in our fists. By evening, as city lights blinked on, we reached a fragile truce. "Halt the sale!" I demanded. She nodded, phone in hand, texting the appraiser to cancel, screen glowing in the dim room. "I'm sorry, Evie. Truly." Mom called midway, her voice tinny on speaker, apologizing again. The three of us connected in awkward reconciliation. But the discovery's sting lingered. Driving home, headlights cutting through dusk, I reflected on the motives unearthed. Envy rooted in childhood inequalities, amplified by life's inequities. It wasn't hatred, not purely, but a toxic brew of comparison and insecurity. My illness had been the catalyst, silenced the veil they hid behind. Yet in revealing it, I'd forced a reckoning. The emotional wreckage laid bare like debris after a flood. Healing would take time, but the betrayal's full weight settled on me that night. In bed with Tom, his breathing even beside me. The house remained ours for now, but the family dynamic had shifted, cracks exposed. I'd reclaimed my voice, but at the cost of innocence, forever altered by the knowledge of how deeply resentment could run, even in blood. The revelation hung over me like a persistent fog, thick and disorienting, seeping into every corner of my days. My voice was back, albeit raspy and tentative, but the words I wanted to hurl, accusations, demands, stuck in my throat like remnants of the illness. Instead, I channeled the hurt into action, methodical and quiet at first, as if piecing together a puzzle I'd never asked to solve. Tom was my ally from the start, his engineering mind turning to strategy over breakfast the morning after the confrontation at Lydia's condo. The kitchen smelled of toasted bread and fresh jam, steam curling from our mugs as he spread out the copied documents on the table, his glasses perched on his nose. "We challenge this legally," he said, his voice steady, pencil tapping the undervalued buyout clause. "But first, secure your position." I nodded, my throat still aching from the previous night's tears, and we mapped it out. Contact our family lawyer, freeze any transactions, and gather more evidence of their intent. It wasn't revenge I sought, not the scorched earth kind that leaves nothing but ashes, but justice, a reclaiming of what was mine by right and heart. That afternoon, I drove to the lawyer's office downtown, the city's hum a distant backdrop through the car windows. Mr. Harlan, a balding man in his 60s with a kind but shrewd gaze, greeted me in his cluttered office, bookshelves groaning under legal tomes, the faint scent of old paper mingling with his aftershave. I laid out the story, my voice gaining strength as I spoke, handing over the folder with a slight tremble. "They used my medical proxy," I explained, detailing the whispers, the appraisal, Lydia's confessions. He listened, jotting notes on a yellow pad, the pen scratching rhythmically. "This is overreach," he confirmed, leaning back in his creaky chair. "The proxy's for health decisions, not asset sales. We can file an injunction to halt any proceedings." Relief washed over me, warm as the sunlight slanting through the blinds, but it was tempered by the emotional toll. As he drafted preliminary letters, crisp demands to cease and desist, copied to Lydia and the appraiser, I felt a shift inside, from victim to advocate. "Send these certified," he advised, sealing envelopes with a decisive lick. I left with copies, the weight in my bag a tangible step forward. Back home, I didn't stop there. The betrayal had unearthed old wounds, and to heal, I needed to understand fully. I spent evenings poring over family records in our attic, dust motes dancing in the flashlight beam as I pulled out boxes labeled in Dad's neat handwriting. Yellowed letters, photo albums with edges curled from time, the scent of aged ink and memories rising as I flipped pages. There, amid childhood snapshots, Lydia and me in matching Easter dresses, her smile forced even then. I found Dad's will, the original, with annotations in Mom's script from years ago. No favoritism explicit, but notes on my responsibility for the house, perhaps planting seeds of resentment. Tom joined me one night, his knees cracking as he knelt beside, handing me a thermos of soup, chicken noodle. Like Mom's, the savory steam comforting in the chill. "Anything?" he asked. I showed him a letter from Lydia to Dad, postmarked during her college years, complaints of feeling overshadowed, her words sharp on the page. "It goes back that far," I whispered, voice hoarse from disuse up there. We talked softly, his hand on my back, planning how to use this, not as ammunition, but context for the confrontation ahead. Meanwhile, I reached out to the kids, careful not to poison the well. Sarah first, over a video call, her face pixelated but concerned, background noise of city traffic filtering through. "Aunt Lydia and Grandma, they're trying to sell the house without me," I explained gently, my tone even despite the ache. She gasped hand to mouth. "Mom, that's awful. What can I do?" Her support bolstered me. We agreed she'd visit soon, a united front. Michael was next at the kitchen table after dinner, pasta remnants on plates, forks set aside. He listened, brow furrowed, then hugged me fiercely, his embrace strong. "I've got your back, Ma." Their loyalty fueled my resolve, turning isolation into alliance. Action escalated when Lydia called 2 days later, her voice clipped over the line. "Evie, the lawyer letter? This is family, not court." I met her at a neutral cafe downtown, the clink of cups and murmur of patrons a buffer. She sat across, stirring sugar into her latte with unnecessary vigor, spoon tinkling against porcelain. "You're overreacting," she started, but I cut in, voice firm. "No, you undermined me. We renegotiate fairly." Dialogue flowed tense but productive. I laid out terms. No sale without consensus. Audit the valuation. She resisted at first, eyes flashing, but relented when I mentioned the kids' involvement. Fine, for Mom's sake. It was a small victory, her signature on a temporary agreement scribbled on a napkin, but it felt like reclaiming ground. Mom was harder. I visited her alone, the house welcoming yet tainted now, the porch swing creaking as I approached, wind chimes tinkling softly. She was in the kitchen, kneading dough for biscuits, flour dusting her apron like snow. "Evie?" she said, not meeting my eyes, hands working the mixture with rhythmic pushes. I sat at the counter, the wood smooth under my palms, and we talked, really talked, for the first time in years. "Why go along?" I asked, voice soft. Tears tracked her cheeks, mixing with the flour. I was scared. Losing the house burdening you. Lydia made it sound easy. Her vulnerability cracked my anger. I hugged her, her frame frail in my arms, promising we'd find solutions together. Perhaps rent adjustments. Not sale. Inner monologue swirled through it all. Doubts about forgiveness, flashes of anger at the injustice. But action grounded me. Physical steps like walking Max in the evenings, his leash taut as he sniffed autumn leaves crunching underfoot, or grading papers at my desk, red pen flowing as I reclaimed routine. Tom and I even planned a small getaway but postponed it. This fight came first. By week's end, the injunction was filed, papers served with a knock on Lydia's door. I imagined her face paling as she signed receipt. It wasn't vindictive. It was necessary, a boundary drawn in ink. As I lay in bed that night, rain tapping the window like impatient fingers, I felt empowerment budding, a quiet strength born from silence's ashes. The plan was set. Confront the roots, redefine terms, heal on my terms. Family wasn't broken, just bent. I'd straighten it, one deliberate action at a time. The legal wheels turned slowly, like an old mill grinding grain into flour, but each step fortified my resolve. The injunction hit its mark. Lydia called the next day, her voice a mix of frustration and defeat over the line, the background hum of her office copier punctuating her words. "Evie, this is escalating. Can't we handle it privately?" I paused, letting the silence stretch, a deliberate echo of my muted weeks. "No," I replied simply, my tone even, throat no longer protesting. "Not after what you did." She sighed, the sound heavy, and agreed to a mediated meeting at the lawyer's office, her concession a small crack in her armor. We met on a crisp Tuesday morning. The law firm's lobby scented with fresh coffee and polished leather, elevator dinging softly as arrivals came and went. Mr. Harlan presided, his conference room table gleaming under fluorescent lights, notepads and pens arranged like soldiers. Lydia arrived first, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, her heels clicking on the tile, folder clutched tightly. Mom followed, cane tapping hesitantly, her face pale against the neutral walls. Tom sat beside me, his hand warm under the table, a silent pillar. The discussion unfolded methodically. Harlan guiding with neutral questions. "Ms. Harper, explain the proxy's use." Lydia defended, her voice professional, citing family necessity and market timing, papers shuffling as she referenced valuations. But under cross-examination, gentle but pointed, cracks showed. "You undervalued intentionally?" Harlan pressed. She faltered, admitting, "To make it feasible." Mom interjected softly, "We meant well," but her eyes darted to me, guilt etched in every line. I spoke up then, voice clear now, recounting the whispers I'd overheard. The documents discovered, the emotional toll. This wasn't care. It was opportunism. During my illness, when I couldn't defend myself. The room quieted, the wall clock's tick amplifying the moment. Lydia's composure slipped. She rubbed her temples, admitting more. I was desperate. Business debts piling up, clients drying post-pandemic. The house seemed like salvation. It humanized her, this villain in my narrative, revealing layers of struggle I'd overlooked. We negotiated terms over hours, coffee cooling in styrofoam cups, the bitter dregs mirroring the bitterness in the air. No immediate sale. The house stayed joint. An independent appraisal, costs split. My share protected with veto power on major decisions. Lydia agreed to therapy, family sessions to unpack the resentment. For us, she said, meeting my eyes for the first time without deflection. Mom nodded, tears glistening. I want my girls back. Leaving the office, the autumn wind whipping leaves around our ankles as we stepped outside, I felt a weight lift, though scars remained. Tom squeezed my hand, his calluses familiar. Proud of you. It was action manifesting change, not dramatic but real, like repairing a fence post by post. Back home, I turned inward, blending action with reflection. Mornings became ritual, journaling at the kitchen table, pen gliding over pages as dawn light filtered through curtains, the scratch of nib on paper therapeutic. I chronicled the betrayal's roots, childhood dynamics where my verbosity overshadowed Lydia's quiet achievements, Mom's unintentional bias reinforcing it. Forgive, but remember, I wrote, the word's a mantra. I also acted practically for the house. Hired a property manager, neutral to ease my load, interviewing candidates over phone calls, voices echoing in my earpiece. Selected one with strong references, her tone efficient yet kind. I'll handle tenants, she assured, and I signed the contract, the pen's click a release. Costs deducted from rents, fairness ensured. Lydia grumbled via text, overkill, but complied, her messages shorter now, laced with caution. The kids played key roles too. Sarah flew in for a weekend, her suitcase thumping in the hall, hugs fierce and scented with her vanilla shampoo. We cooked together, lasagna layering in the pan, cheese melting gooey under the broiler. As she listened, her knife chopping onions rhythmically. Aunt Lydia's always been competitive, she observed, wiping tears from the sting. But this? Low. Her presence bolstered me. We visited Mom together, the car ride filled with light chatter, radio humming softly. At the house, Sarah mediated subtly, her graphic design eye suggesting updates. Paint the kitchen, fresh start. Mom agreed, her smile tentative as we picked swatches. Colors vibrant on the samples. Michael dove into research, his history background turning analytical. Over pizza one evening, crust crispy, pepperoni curling at edges, he presented findings on family estates, laptop screen glowing. Precedents show equal shares hold unless contested. It armed me for future talks, his enthusiasm infectious. We're a team, Ma. Their involvement wasn't just support. It was action, weaving them into the resolution, strengthening bonds frayed by the secret. Emotionally, I confronted Lydia one-on-one again, at a park bench overlooking the lake. Ducks quacking in the distance, water lapping gently. No lawyers, just sisters. I brought coffee, steam rising from lids, the aroma grounding. Why not ask for help? I started, voice soft. She stared at the horizon, wind ruffling her hair. Pride. You seemed untouchable. Dialogue flowed haltingly, admissions of her loneliness post-divorce, envy of my perfect life. I shared vulnerabilities, fears during illness, doubts in marriage's quieter moments. No one's perfect, I said. Tears came, hers silent, mine choked. We didn't hug, not yet, but parted with a nod, a promise to try. Action extended to self-care. I resumed teaching part-time, classroom door swinging open to familiar chalk scent, students' chairs scraping as they settled. Miss Harper's back. One cheered and I smiled, voice warm in lectures. Yoga classes twice weekly, mat unrolling with a thud, breaths deep amid incense haze. Tom and I dated again, walks in the woods, leaves crunching under boots, hands linked. We got through, he'd murmur, kissing my temple. By month's end, the family reconvened at the house for dinner. Pot roast simmering, carrots tender, gravy bubbling. Tension lingered, forks clinking awkwardly at first, but conversation eased. Mom sharing old stories, laughter tentative, then genuine. Lydia apologized formally, voice steady. I was wrong. Let's rebuild. We toasted with water glasses, clinking clear, to new terms, open communication, shared decisions, therapy starting next week. It wasn't seamless. Resentment's echoes whispered in quiet moments, but action had shifted power. I'd asserted, not aggressed, reclaiming narrative. As we cleared plates, suds foaming in the sink, I felt peace budding, like spring after winter's freeze. Family redefined, not blind trust, but earned vigilant bonds. My silence had birthed this strength. Now, voice amplified, I'd nurture it forward. The news rippled out slowly at first, like pebbles dropped into a still pond, the circles widening until they touched shores I hadn't anticipated. I'd kept the betrayal close initially, confiding only in Tom and the kids, our family circle a tight knot against the storm. But families like ours, rooted in a small town where everyone knows your business from church potlucks or school events, don't stay insulated long. Whispers have a way of traveling, carried on the wind of shared coffees and sidelong glances. It started with Sarah. She'd flown back home after our tense mediation, her presence a balm during those raw days, but she carried the weight of it with her to the city. Over lunch with a mutual cousin, our Aunt Rita's daughter, who still lived nearby, she let slip fragments, her voice low over clinking silverware in a downtown diner. Mom's dealing with some family stuff. Aunt Lydia and Grandma tried to sell the house behind her back. The cousin, ever the gossip with her wide network from the local library, nodded sympathetically, but by evening the thread had unraveled further. A text from Rita pinged my phone as I stirred soup on the stove, the savory broth bubbling gently. Evie, heard about the house trouble. You okay? Call if you need. I sighed, setting the spoon down with a soft clatter, the steam fogging my glasses. Tom glanced up from his newspaper at the table, rustling pages. Words out? I nodded, texting back vaguely. Handling it, thanks. But Rita's concern was the first wave. Soon, the community tide rolled in. At church that Sunday, the organ's notes still vibrating in the air as we filed out, Mrs. Ellis from next door pulled me aside in the fellowship hall, her hand on my arm, perfume floral and overpowering. Evelyn, dear, I overheard at the bridge club. Your sister and mother selling your share? That's just awful. Her eyes brimmed with pity, coffee cup steaming in her other hand. I managed a tight smile, the linoleum cool under my shoes, murmuring, It's complicated, but we're sorting it. Inside, though, humiliation burned. My private pain now public fodder. The antagonist, Lydia, and to a lesser extent Mom, faced the fallout indirectly at first. Lydia's real estate business relied on reputation. In a town like ours where deals sealed over handshakes at barbecues, trust was currency. By midweek, she called me, voice strained over the line, background noise of her office fan whirring. Clients are asking questions, Evie. Rumors about family disputes. It's hurting closings. I felt a pang, not vindictive joy, but a quiet acknowledgement of consequence. Actions have ripples, I replied softly, echoing words I'd used in teaching moral dilemmas from literature. Mom felt it too, her world smaller but no less affected. She volunteered at the senior center, knitting circles and bingo nights where chatter flowed freely. A visit from her friend Gladys, cane tapping up the porch steps, brought the first direct hit. Over tea in the living room, cups clinking on saucers, biscuits crumbling flaky on plates, Gladys broached it gently. Heard about the house kerfuffle. You and the girls okay? Mom later confided to me, her voice quavering on the phone. I had to explain. Evie? She looked at me different, like I'd done something shameful. Shame. That was the moral consequence. A mirror held up to their choices, reflecting not just greed, but the fracture of family bonds. The workplace amplified it for me. Back at school full-time, the staff room buzzed with subdued energy, colleagues who'd heard through the grapevine, perhaps from parents at PTA meetings. The principal pulled me into her office one afternoon, door clicking shut behind us, the scent of her peppermint tea hanging in the air. Evelyn, if you need time off for personal matters... She trailed off, concern etching her face. I assured her I was fine, but the dignity I clung to felt tested. Asserting myself meant owning the narrative, not shrinking from it. In class, a student even asked innocently during a discussion on betrayal in Othello, "Like family stuff, Miss Harper?" The room hushed, pencils pausing mid-scratch. I paused, then used it. Exactly. Trust broken hurts, but facing it builds strength. Their nods, thoughtful, turned the personal into a lesson, justice in small measures. Lydia bore the brunt publicly. A potential client canceled a showing, citing, "Heard about your family issues. Don't want drama." She texted me screenshots, her messages terse. "This what you wanted?" "No," I replied honestly, but it was inevitable. At a local realtor's luncheon, tables laden with sandwiches, voices mingling, she faced whispers, heads turning as she entered. One colleague approached directly, fork poised over salad. "Lydia, is it true you tried to cut out your sister?" Her denial fell flat. The seed of doubt planted. It wasn't cruelty, but accountability, the social fabric enforcing what law couldn't fully touch. Mom's circle closed ranks subtly. At the senior center, invitations dwindled. Her knitting group met without her 1 week, excuses thin over the phone. "They think I'm untrustworthy," she wept to me during a visit, her hands idle in her lap, yarn untouched. I held her, the wool of her sweater soft against my cheek, offering comfort without absolution. "Choices have costs, Mom. We learn." It dignified the process. Justice is growth, not punishment. The kids navigated it too. Sarah fielded questions from extended family online. Her responses measured, "It's private," but Mom's handling it with grace. Michael at a cousin's gathering deflected barbs aimed at Lydia. "Family's complicated." Their poise reflected the moral core we'd instilled. No gloating. Just steady truth. As the week wore on, the consequences coalesced into a quiet reckoning. Lydia's business dipped temporarily, forcing her to reflect. Mom's isolation prompted outreach, tentative apologies to friends over coffee. The community watched, not with pitchforks but expectant eyes, waiting for mending. I stood taller, dignity intact, the public mirror reflecting not my weakness, but their missteps. Justice in its social form was served cool and inevitable, a lesson in the power of unspoken codes. The ripples didn't stop at whispers and canceled lunches. They swelled into tangible waves that reshaped our family's place in the community, forcing Lydia and Mom to confront the moral ledger they'd unbalanced. Dignity became my guide, not crowing over their discomfort, but letting the natural fallout teach what words couldn't. I'd always believed in justice as a quiet force, like gravity pulling things back to earth. And here it was, manifesting in the everyday interactions that knit our town together. Lydia's professional world cracked first, more visibly. As a real estate agent, her name was her brand, plastered on yard signs dotting lawns, her face smiling from bus benches with that confident tilt. But rumors erode trust like water on stone. A week after the injunction, she lost a big listing, a lakeside property she'd courted for months. The owners, old friends of our family from Dad's carpentry days, called her directly. I heard about it secondhand from Tom, who'd run into the husband at the hardware store, nails clinking in his basket as they chatted aisles apart. They said it felt off, dealing with someone who'd scheme against kin, Tom relayed that evening, over grilled salmon, flakes falling apart under forks, lemon zest sharp on the tongue. Lydia confirmed it in a terse call later. They cited integrity concerns. Happy now? Her voice held no bite, just weariness, the fight leaching out. It wasn't happiness I felt, but a somber validation. She faced it at the Chamber of Commerce meeting too, held in the community hall with its echoing acoustics and folding chairs scraping on linoleum. Colleagues who'd once clapped her on the back now offered polite nods, conversations veering away mid-sentence. One rival agent even quipped over coffee urns, steam rising in curls. "Heard you're flipping family assets now." Laughter tittered, cups clinking awkwardly. Lydia held her head high, but confided to me later, during our first therapy session, the therapist's office scented with lavender diffuser humming softly. "It stings, Evie. Reputation took years to build." The moral weight settled there. Her ambition, unchecked, had cost her standing. A social exile of sorts in our interconnected world. Mom's consequences unfolded more intimately in the spaces she cherished. The senior center, with its bingo cards shuffling and yarn balls unspooling in knitting circles, became a minefield of judgment. Gladys and the others didn't shun her outright. That wasn't our town's way. But the invitations thinned, replaced by sympathetic pats on the hand that felt like pity. "We understand, dear," one said during a rare visit, her voice low over shuffled cards, the marker's cap popping as she daubed numbers. Mom withdrew, spending more afternoons alone in the house, the grandfather clock ticking in empty rooms, her cane propped unused. She called me one rainy day, voice small through the receiver, rain pattering on her window like fingers drumming. "They look at me like I'm the villain, Evie. Did I deserve this?" I visited that afternoon, the drive slick with puddles reflecting gray skies. We sat on the porch swing, its chains creaking rhythmically, wrapped in blankets against the chill. "Actions echo, Mom," I said gently, not accusing, just stating. She nodded, tears tracing wrinkles, and shared how the isolation forced reflection, nights replaying decisions, the weight of complicity heavier than her arthritis. Justice here was internal, a moral mirror she couldn't avoid, prompting her to write letters, apologies to friends, handwritten on stationery scented faintly with rosewater, envelopes sealed with trembling fingers. Some responded warmly, bridges mending over shared teas. Others held back, a lesson in trust's fragility. The broader family felt it too. Cousins at holiday gatherings, once lively with shared stories around laden tables, now laced with awkward pauses. Aunt Rita hosted a barbecue, smoke curling from the grill, burgers sizzling with onion tang. Whispers circled. "Heard about the house?" Eyes flicked to Lydia and Mom, plates balanced uneasily. No outright confrontations, but the social pressure nudged accountability. Lydia donating to a local charity, her check handed over at a fundraiser with flashbulbs popping. Mom volunteering more, her hands sorting donations at the food bank, boxes thumping on tables. It was restitution, subtle and self-imposed, the community's gaze enforcing ethics where law left off. For me, the public eye brought unexpected support, bolstering my dignity. Neighbors dropped by with casseroles, tuna noodle, cheese bubbling golden, their knocks firm on the door. "We're with you, Evelyn," Mrs. Ellis said, dish warm in her hands. At school, colleagues offered quiet solidarity in the staff room, coffee maker gurgling as they poured. "Family's tough, but you handled it, class," one murmured. It wasn't pity. It was respect, affirming my stand without fanfare. As the waves receded, balance restored somewhat. Lydia's business stabilizing with transparent deals. Mom's circle warming anew. The consequences lingered as reminders. No cruelty, just the inexorable pull of righting wrongs. In our town, where lives intertwine like vines on a trellis, betrayal's cost was social currency spent, lessons etched in the quiet judgments of those who matter. Justice, dignified and enduring, had spoken. The months following the public unraveling were like tending a garden after a harsh winter. Slow, deliberate work, pulling weeds of resentment while nurturing fragile new growth. My voice was fully mine again, strong and steady, but I used it sparingly at first, choosing words like seeds planted with care. The house stood as it always had, its Victorian eaves casting long shadows in the afternoon sun. But now it symbolized more, a battleground turned sanctuary, its fate secured through the injunction and our renegotiated agreement. No sale, not yet. Instead, we'd maintain it jointly, with transparent ledgers and monthly check-ins, the property manager's reports arriving like clockwork in my email, attachments opening with a click to reveal balanced books. Healing began at home, in the quiet rhythms Tom and I reclaimed. Evenings found us on the couch, his arm draped over my shoulders, the remote passing between us as we watched documentaries, the narrator's voice a soothing drone, popcorn kernels crunching softly. "We're okay," he'd murmur during commercials, his beard tickling my ear, and I'd nod, feeling the truth settle deeper each time. Our marriage, tested by the strain, emerged stronger. We talked more openly now, over morning coffee, steam rising in lazy spirals, sharing fears I'd buried, the vulnerability of silence, the sting of family deceit. I felt helpless, I confessed one dawn, the kitchen light warm on our faces. He listened, hand covering mine, calluses rough yet comforting. Small gestures rebuilt us. Weekend drives to the lake, water lapping gently at the shore as we skipped stones, their plunks echoing our laughter. The kids were pillars in this mending. Sarah visited more, her flights booked impulsively, suitcase wheels rumbling over the threshold. We'd bake together, apple pies, cinnamon wafting through the house, dough rolling under pins with satisfying thuds. "You've got this, Mom," she'd say, hugging me flour-dusted, her confidence a mirror to my growing strength. Michael dove into family history projects, scanning old photos at the kitchen table, scanner humming as images digitized. "Look at this. You and Aunt Lydia as kids," he'd point out. Screen glowing, the black and white shot showing us arm in arm, grins wide. It prompted reflections, not bitterness. We discussed inheritance openly now, his insights wise beyond years. Their presence wove a safety net, turning isolation into connection, empowering me to redefine boundaries. With Lydia, the path was thornier, but we walked it step by step. Therapy sessions started weekly, the counselor's office a neutral ground with plush chairs and tissues boxed neatly on the side table. We'd arrive separately, her car parked a space away from mine but leave closer, figuratively at least. "I envied your ease," she'd admit in one session, voice soft, hands clasped in her lap, the clock ticking steadily. I'd respond measuredly. "And I overlooked your struggles." Dialogue peeled layers, revealing shared pains, Dad's absence hitting us differently, Mom's favoritism a wound we'd both carried. No instant forgiveness but progress. Joint lunches after, at a quiet cafe, sandwiches crunching, conversations shifting from accusations to plans. "Let's audit the house together," I suggested once, napkins scribbled with notes. She agreed, her nod tentative but genuine, Mom's healing intertwined with ours, her frailty a reminder of time's limits. I visited often, bringing groceries, bags rustling with fresh produce, apples thumping into the bowl. We'd sit in the garden, her gloved hands weeding slowly, soil crumbling dark and rich. "I was weak, Evie," she'd say, eyes on the roses, petals unfurling pink. I'd pat her back, feeling bones beneath, and share updates. "We're trying." "Mom?" She joined a session eventually, cane propped by the door, her confessions tearful. "I pitted you girls without seeing." It fostered empathy. We planned family dinners, pot roast simmering, carrots tender. The oak table a symbol of reunion. Laughter returned gradually, stories flowing over wine glasses clinking, the warmth rebuilding what deceit had chilled. Professionally, I thrived anew. Back in the classroom, I lectured with renewed passion, voice resonant as I dissected literature's betrayals, Hamlet's ghosts, Scout's realizations. Students leaned in, pencils scratching, the chalk dust familiar and grounding. "What do we learn from broken trust?" I'd ask, pacing the linoleum, heels clicking. Their answers mirrored my journey, resilience, boundaries. Outside work, I volunteered at the library, shelving books with rhythmic thuds, recommending reads on family dynamics to patrons whose eyes held similar shadows. It gave purpose, turning pain into service. Inner peace came in solitude, too. Morning walks with Max, leash taut as he sniffed dew-kissed grass, birds chirping overhead. I'd reflect, the illness a curse turned gift, silence unveiling truths. Journaling evolved into letters, unsent at first, then shared. One to Lydia, words flowing honest on paper, envelopes sealed with care. "Let's build better," it ended. Her reply arrived days later, handwriting looped. Agreed. Sisters first. By spring, buds blooming on branches, the healing felt tangible. A new beginning, scars fading like winter's frost. Family terms redefined, not obligation, but choice. Love earned through honesty. I stood taller, empowered, the house's porch swing creaking under me as I sipped tea, steam curling, watching the world awaken. Peace wasn't perfect, but it was mine, reclaimed from betrayal's depths. The arc of healing curved gently, like a river finding its way after a flood, carving new paths through familiar terrain. With the public consequences fading into background murmurs, Lydia's business stabilizing with cautious clients, Mom's social circle thawing over shared apologies, I focused outward, extending the mending beyond our immediate circle. Community ties frayed by the rumors needed tending too. I started small, attending the senior center with Mom one afternoon, her arm linked in mine as we entered, the door's bell tinkling brightly. Heads turned, conversations pausing mid-sentence, but I smiled steadily, introducing a neutral topic. Anyone tried the new pie recipe in the newsletter? Laughter broke the ice, chairs scraping as we joined the knitting group, yarn looping in familiar rhythms. Mom's hands steadied with purpose, her inclusion a quiet victory, whispers shifting from judgment to welcome. Lydia and I collaborated on a charity event, a subtle act of restitution. Her real estate network organized a home repair drive for local families, hammers echoing in driveways as volunteers fixed roofs and painted walls, the scent of fresh lumber mingling with sawdust. I contributed by rallying school colleagues, boxes of supplies thumping into trucks. "It's giving back," Lydia said during setup, her voice low over clinking tools, our eyes meeting in shared understanding. The event drew a crowd, applause rippling at the close, and in that we found common ground, ambition redirected, envy alchemized into partnership. Press coverage was minimal, a local paper blurb with our names side by side, ink fresh on the page, but it signaled renewal to those who'd watched the drama unfold. Personal growth bloomed in unexpected ways. I enrolled in a writing workshop at the community college, evenings filled with the scratch of pens on notebooks, the room scented with coffee from the vending machine. "Write your truth," the instructor urged, and I did. Essays on silence and voice, words flowing cathartic. Sharing snippets with Tom over late-night tea, steam curling under the kitchen light, his nods encouraging. Powerful. Evie. It transformed the betrayal's pain into art, a reclamation that empowered beyond family confines. Students noticed too, my lectures infused with deeper empathy, discussing forgiveness in literature, voice resonant. It's not erasure, but choice. Their essays reflected it. Pages turned in with thoughtful margins. The house became a hub for this new chapter. We hosted a family gathering, not tense mediation, but a barbecue in the backyard, grill smoke curling lazy, burgers sizzling with onion tang. Sarah designed invitations, her graphic flair adding whimsy. Michael manned the music, playlist humming from speakers. Lydia arrived with salads, bowls clinking on the picnic table. Mom baked her famous cobbler, peaches bubbling golden. Conversation flowed haltingly at first, weather, work, but eased into reminiscences. "Remember Dad's stories here?" Laughter followed, genuine and warm, the sun dipping low, casting golden hues. It wasn't flawless. Glances held remnants of hurt, but it was progress, redefining family as intentional, not assumed. Therapy continued, a steady anchor. Sessions delved deeper, the counselor's questions probing like gentle probes. What does forgiveness look like? Lydia shared vulnerabilities, her post-divorce isolation, condo echoing empty, and I opened about the fear during illness, Throat's betrayal mirroring families. Mom contributed tales of her own youth, sibling rivalries echoing ours, her voice gaining strength. Homework assignments bridged gaps, shared journals, entries passed like olive branches. "I see you now," Lydia wrote once, handwriting steady. My reply, "And I you." It fostered warmth, not just tolerance. Hugs at session's end, arms lingering a beat longer. New beginnings sprouted in daily life. Tom and I planned that delayed getaway, a cabin by the lake, rented for a weekend, the drive winding through autumn foliage, leaves crunching under tires. There, by the water's edge, waves lapping rhythmic, we talked futures, retirement dreams, perhaps traveling, his hand in mine as stars pricked the sky. "You've grown through this," he said, fire crackling in the pit, marshmallows toasting sweet. Back home, I gardened more, fingers in dirt planting bulbs, tulips pushing through spring soil, a metaphor for resilience. Empowerment settled deep, a quiet fire. I advocated for others now, joining a support group for family estrangements at the library. Chairs circled intimate, stories shared over herbal tea. Silence revealed my strength. I offered one meeting, voice calm, others nodding in recognition. It connected me to a wider web, turning personal healing into communal. As seasons turned, peace rooted firm. Family dinners became routine, the oak table witnessing lighter hearts, recipes exchanged, grandkids' photos passed, laughter echoing off walls. Forgiveness wasn't forgetting, but forward motion. Strength not in silence, but spoken truths. I'd reclaimed power, redefined bonds on terms of equity and empathy. Life, once fractured, now mosaic, beautiful in its pieced-together wholeness. Looking back now, with the clarity that only time can bring, I see how that season of silence reshaped me, like a river carving stone into something smoother, more resilient. The old Victorian house still stands on Maple Street, its porch swing creaking gently in the breeze, a place of memories rather than contention. We've kept it, managing it together now. Lydia handling the market watches with her sharp eye, Mom tending the garden with hands that tremble less these days, and me overseeing the little details, like the scent of fresh paint on the walls we updated last spring. It's not perfect. Family never is. There are still moments when old resentments flicker, like embers in a dying fire. A sharp word over dinner, a glance that lingers too long. But we've learned to douse them with honesty. With the therapy sessions that have become our monthly ritual, the counselor's calm voice guiding us through the undercurrents. Tom and I walk there often, hand in hand, Max trotting ahead with his tail wagging, the leaves crunching underfoot in autumn's hush. Our life has deepened. The kids visit more, filling the rooms with laughter, Sarah with her sketches spread on the table, Michael debating history over coffee, its rich aroma weaving through conversations that flow easier now. I've returned to teaching with a renewed passion, my voice steady as I share stories of betrayal and redemption from the classics, watching my students' eyes light up with understanding. It's as if losing my words taught me their true power, not to command, but to connect, to heal. Lydia and I are sisters again, not just in name. We share lunches downtown, her laughter brighter, less guarded, as we plan for Mom's care or reminisce about Dad's old jokes. She's rebuilt her business on firmer ground, and I've learned to see her strengths without the shadow of comparison. Mom, too, has found peace, her days filled with the senior center's chatter once more, her apologies accepted like mended quilts. The betrayal, once a gaping wound, has scarred over into a lesson. Family isn't about perfection, but presence, showing up, even when it's hard. If there's one truth I've carried from this, it's that silence can be a teacher, revealing what noise drowns out. Resentment festers in the unsaid. Healing blooms in the spoken. I reclaimed my power not through anger, but assertion, redefining our bonds on terms of trust and equity. Life moves forward, warmer for the trials, like sunlight after rain. Would you have confronted the betrayal as I did, or let the silence linger? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories. If this touched you, consider subscribing for more tales of the heart, or supporting the channel to keep these voices alive. Until next time, take care of your own.